Hello, folks. Welcome aboard this week. Last week, I sort of did a little bit of a rant about the proliferation of rental moorings and kind of spilled the beans about how my enjoyment of a place is inversely proportioned to the amount of sheltered water that is taken over by rental moorings. I want to go a little deeper this week and talk about the second half of that discussion, which is the internet reservation system that's now become ubiquitous for these rental moorings. And get into a little bit of a discussion about that. And again, this is a discussion. I realize that to many people with a different perspective, the things that are least appealing to me would be most appealing. So chime in, feel free to tell me what you think. But essentially, what I'm talking about here are systems that marinas, boatyards, or municipalities have contracted for a percentage cut to control the rental of their mooring field. This creates some interesting situations that I'll discuss, but suffice to say that my general feeling about this is that when you attempt to treat the reservation system for basically a mooring field, someplace that you arrive by water, in the same manner that you would a place that you arrive by car, it really breaks down in a few critical ways, and that's what I want to talk about here. This probably won't be the first time that you've heard me rant about the mooring reservation online setup that's taken over the world, or even just the fact that every place you go now is packed full of rental moorings. The problem with that is that if you decide that on this particular 4th of July weekend you're going to go to Edgartown for a cruise or for fireworks or for any other reason, and then you find that the wind is against you or the weather is against you in some other way and don't go, if you've made a reservation for that weekend in January, you may be able to get your money back. It's probably a way to do that. But what you've also done is you've made it so that somebody coming from the opposite direction with a fair wind, or somebody coming for another reason, isn't going to go, because they're going to look and see that all the moorings are reserved and there's no room at the inn, so to speak. So that's one of a number of reasons that I just simply don't go to places anymore where I'm not allowed or able to anchor. Anchoring is and always will be an act of navigation. And when I have authorities telling me that I can't navigate my boat in a certain way, and really just for the sake of local tax or profit, then frankly, I'd enjoy more being somewhere else anyway. So that's kind of my outlook on that. Now, to a lot of folks, the ability to pay for their rental mooring with an app will seem like a great convenience. And certainly to the municipalities and marinas, it's far more convenient to only have to verify that the boat that's on the mooring is the one that paid for it, rather than have to collect cash, issue a receipt, and then do all the associated accounting that goes with it. I understand that, and I think there's a valid point to be made there. But what you have to realize is that these companies are not charities. And while you may go to their website and see that it says that everything is free, there's no cost, you can register with the app and store your credit card information with them, that's a half-truth. The real truth is that these are brokerage services and they take a fee. It's legitimate, and there's nothing wrong with that, but what you have to understand is that that fee is going to be added to what the entity that possesses that mooring expects to get. So the price will be higher than it might have been in the older days when somebody came around in a skiff and collected your mooring fee. Nothing's free. And certainly the brokerage of rental moorings is by no means free. To illustrate that, I would tell the brief story of one of my trips back from Maine when I decided to stop in Marblehead, Mass, and get up crack of dawn the next morning in order to make the tide at the Cape Cod Canal coming into Buzzards Bay. So I pulled out my cruising guide, which wasn't more than a year out of date, but cruising guide said that mooring rentals from the town of Marblehead were $40 a night, and I thought, well, fair enough, that fits the budget. And into the harbor I went. As I would any place else, I hailed the harbor master and asked him for a mooring assignment. And the response from the young assistant came back as, you got to go to www.blah blah blah. And I said, hang on there, Junior, there's two thumbs on this boat and they're both in use driving it, so if you want me to rent a mooring, I'm happy to pay you for it, but you need to tell me which mooring to pick up, and then I'll pick up my phone and figure this system out. I could almost hear his eyes roll back in his head, but I probably wasn't the first old guy he dealt with. So he pointed me to a mooring. I picked it up. I went to the appropriate unmentioned site. Found that though I had used it once before, it didn't remember any of my passwords or anything else, so I had to essentially set the account up again. And when I did set the account up, by the way, these sites often do not tell you how much the mooring is until you go to pay for it. There's no shopping here. When I did set it up, it came back demanding $75, not $40, as last summer's cruising guide had indicated. So I called the assistant harbor master back and I said, look, I'm just an old guy here, and I'm obviously doing something wrong because your app thinks the Queen Mary has arrived. And he said, oh no, that's the new rate. That's how much it is, but you get launch service with it this year. And I said, well, I don't want launch service. I want to tie up to a mooring, sleep, get up at 5 a.m. and get underway. And he said, well, you can apply for a refund of the launch service part of the fee. I'm still waiting on that refund. Well, a system that uses reservations, internet payment, and essentially the same rules as hotels or RV parks may on the surface sound convenient, particularly for a lot of mariners who have a death fear of having to use their own ground tackle because they haven't developed their anchoring skills to a point of confidence. While that may all sound good and convenient, the simple truth of the matter is that a system that works well when you drive up in a metal box that can travel in all weather has no connection to the exigencies of current, wind direction. That may all sound good and well, but the simple fact is that if you sail in a place like Buzzards Bay or Vineyard Sound, where currents can run quite strong and the time you leave is dictated not by a checkout time, not by the arrival of the next reservee, but rather by the tide and wind change. A system that may allow you to leave on the intended day or may have that day produce rapidly changed conditions that make departure anything but a good seamanship choice. That is a system at direct loggerheads with the most basic tenets of seamanship. So you might say, well, okay, you've outlined the problem. What's the solution? Well, the simple truth is I don't know what the solution is. The only solution that I have come upon and consider to be my own personal way of dealing with the matter is not to participate. I won't say I have never used an internet app to rent a mooring. I have arrived in a couple of different locations on my way to Maine and back where I only found out after arriving that that was the only way to do it. But to use that system to mark my space for a mooring on a weekend where I have absolutely no idea whether the conditions or tides or winds are going to make it prudent for me to reach that mooring, that is something I flat out refuse to do. And so you might say, well, you know, what's that? That's just one person. It's just one vote and $1. In the relative scheme of things, you're right, it isn't much. But it's what I can do, and like the story of the little boy walking along the beach, picking up starfish above the low tide mark and throwing them back into the water. And the old man going up to him and saying, "Why are you doing that? It's only one starfish. Look, there's thousands of them. Can't possibly make a difference." The boy looking at the old man in his childhood wisdom and saying, "Makes a difference to that one."